Recording from New York, WBJC FM. Inside, Gene Shepard.
Sounds throughout the nation, echoing from valley to river and from hill to mountaintop. Nothing like little truth, right? A little cream and maybe some blueberries on it, right? Possibly a little sugar, right? Followed with a little black coffee. Kind of sets you up for the day. Once again, all the news that wasn't quite fit to print is coming your way. Mankind picking through the vast garbage heap of existence, trying to find an eternal Coke bottle to trade in for another 2 cents, hoping against hope. To sinuses anytime. Joe, would you please help me here for a moment? I hate to interrupt your conversation, and tell them Roosevelt Raceway's closed, will you? What's the matter there? All right, now, I would desire your assistance now in a little experiment here. Just a minute. Let's see. Do you recognize that? Okay, did you get that? You don't recognize that? Oh, they cut down the old pine tree. Yes, they cut down the old pine tree to make a coffin of pine for that sweetheart of mine. Oh, they cut down the old pine tree. You don't recognize that? Well, those 2 tinfoil ears that you got hanging on the side of your head don't help one damn bit. I can tell you that. It's sad, you know. I mean, before the shortages, people used to have tin ears. Now they only have tinfoil ears. They cut down the... Now, I want you to, if you can, I don't know whether it's possible, but can you record this for me? I want just a phrase that I want you to record, and can you play it back to me while I'm on the air? You can't do that? You only have 2 machines. What does that mean? One machine is constantly recording all the telephone conversations that are being made in the entire building, you say, right? Well, okay, I'll have to do this entire production then without the aid of technical assistance, which is to say, the aesthetics of the whole show have just gone down the drain. Let's see. Maybe I can play it myself. I'll have to play it live. And hey, here's what the whole point of this is. I mean, be honest with you. I think that the word... the press and the media has become very important in the last 10 years, right? People constantly talk about the press. In fact, I'm going to make a prediction right here now. You get ready for prediction time, Shepard's prediction time? I would say that by 1978, maybe 80, the power of the press will have risen to such a point that it will occupy in our country much the same status that has been occupied by the church in other countries and the military in other countries. Now I'm talking about political status. In many countries, for example, around the world, it is a fact of life in those countries that the military must be consulted before any kind of law is passed. They're the unofficial government. They really are. In other countries, it's the church. So the church must be consulted. Whoever the archbishop is or whoever is in that area there, that church must be consulted, or else forget it. It's just not going to. They're an unofficial arm of the government. Now, in the origin of our country, way back, how many years? 200 years ago, when our country was founded, the great fears, of course, of the people in those days was a dictatorship of the military, and that's why the president was made commander-in-chief of the military. Did you know that's why they did that? Oh, yeah. A civilian commander-in-chief. They were afraid because they had come out of Europe, those people, and they had found that that in many cases the head of a government was also the leading general. I mean, and so they made or stipulated a rule that the president had to be a civilian. And even if he had been a general before that, he had to stop, forget it. He was now a civilian, and we've had several generals that have become presidents, but they had to become civilians to be president. Eisenhower had to resign his commission. Grant, other presidents who were generals at one time or another had to, simply stop being a general. Now, in other countries, that isn't true. I mean, the general, often the head of the country becomes a general then at that point. He does. Marshal Stalin became a marshal in the army. He was generalissimos and so forth constantly. Well, all right, that's another story. Now, there was also a great fear of the church, right? Because there had been many church dictatorial people that they were escaping from around 200, maybe 250 years ago. Now, so I say that by 1980, roughly, but they did not understand that in 200 years ago, there was no such thing as media. As we certainly know it in our day, there were just a few newspapers, that's all. But now there is a thing called media, which is very, very powerful. And in a sense, that has stepped into the void. The media has become the great guardian of morals and patriotism and all the rest of it, which the church used to be in many countries, the guardian of morals, the arbiter of what is right and wrong. This is also what the military in many countries sets itself up to be, is the arbiter of what is really patriotic for the Slavovians, what is really good for the people of lower Slavovia or upper Slavovia, whatever it might be. Now, in our case, and in the case of many people in the world, the media just didn't exist. So I say, I'm making a prediction here, that by 1980, since the press has been almost an undeclared, unspecified organ of government, it really has become that pretty much. Oh yes, newspapers are outraged now. I mean, the whole press will become outraged when a president makes a decision they don't like. They demand the immediate restitution or correction of that. That by 1980, the president who will be in at that time, whoever he might be, 1980, 84, maybe 84, yeah, he will have recognized this, because there will be constant carping and criticism and complaining among the press about various whoever's in, and there will be the appointment. I'm making a prediction. There will be the appointment of the president by something that will be called roughly the national, possibly presidential will be in the title, but I doubt it, the National Media Advisory Board. Sounds logical, doesn't it? And there will be, like, say, 24 major media members, the Times, the Washington Post, all the various type, and they will pass on all legislation on an unofficial basis before it's passed. You can see that, can't you? And so the president will get a bill before him, and then he'll have to call Reston and all the boys in and say, now, what do you think, fellas? Shall I do this or not? And they will vote. And then if say there's 45 guys on this council, if 40 of them vote for it, okay, he stamps it, and it goes. And at that point, can you see that? Now, I'm not. This should not be construed as anti-press, what I'm saying here. I'm just merely predicting something that could come to pass. And you heard it here first. I'm just saying it's not anti-press. I'm merely saying that this is what I think will happen. If people say Shepard never deals in things political, this is exactly what this is. But it's not political. It's more social. It's a social trend. And of course, I think a lot of people would welcome such a thing, because just as in many countries, many people would welcome the ascension of the military, or many people would welcome the ascension of the church. Depends on how you feel about those institutions. And I suspect that a lot of people would feel a little bit secure sleeping in the knowledge that Walter Cronkite is very carefully considering all the current and I might add, and Walter Cronkite, of course, will consult with Eric Sevareid, and Eric Sevareid will call Mr. Reston, and or their equivalents of that period. And a lot of us will say, at last, civilization, at last we have come into clear, bright waters of lucidity. Do you see that coming to pass? Oh, yeah. And of course, eventually you'll see the eventual clash where the president or whoever's in or let's say the Senate will have a great clash with the media, who will feel one way about one thing and the media will feel another. And at that point, then the country will take great sides. And I see the victory of the media. And then ultimately, they'll finally have to say, well, we've got to cut out all this messing around. That's the trouble with democracy. Slobs keep getting elected. And a lot of people are already saying that. They really are. You know, that's been said in America for, probably 25 years or better. In fact, it was said from the time of, did you know that when that first talk began to start out, historically, it began during the days of the Great Commoner. Who was that? What president was known as the Great Commoner? Let's give you a clue. He was named Andrew Jackson. That's correct. And already voices were heard as long ago as that. That was back in the early 1800s. It was, well, where did Jackson make his name? Well, among other places, the Battle of New Orleans. And what war was that in? Come on, keep your head going there. But, all right, we'll leave that past. That's for graduate students in history. Nevertheless, much dissatisfaction with democracy was shown when Jackson got into the White House and immediately began to throw big dances, and all his buddies came in and spit tobacco juice on the floor, on the parquet floors. Yeah, they come in there, and one guy even rode his mule in, and anybody could come to see the president. You drop by, and he's sitting in his office chewing tobacco. You drop in, and that was a whole different lifestyle. And a lot of papers began to voice dissatisfaction with democracy because clods could get elected, and to this day there are echoes of that, more than echoes in some cases. So, yeah, and we tend to think of the press as one big entity today. Well, it isn't. But nevertheless, I read all kinds of papers. I read all sorts of papers. I love to listen to news of all types, not because I'm hung on the particular event, but the way it's reported. A lot of no matter what it is, now there is a sense of, well, we're being led down the garden path. In fact, the other day I heard a very cynical weather report. Oh yes, Oh yes, where where he implied that the weather was playing a dirty trick on the weather department, or at least this weather department of this television station, by doing what it did. I mean, it rained holy hell when he had predicted only a 12% chance of rain. And now he did not say I erred. He implied that whatever gods are in charge of the weather were once again being perfidious and sneaky, and had rolled those big bowling balls down the vast bowling lane of Jupiter Pluvius, and plume, it came down without consulting Dr. Frank Fields. And it gets pretty. Yes, it gets very unmanageable. And so tonight, I have one of my favorite papers. Whenever it starts to gather around me, I mean, the great technological life of media, of which I am an indisputable part. Whenever it starts to gather around me, I have several papers that I read as a kind of antidote to what might be called slick, I suppose you might say, canned journalism. Are you aware that almost every paper in the country today publishes almost all the same columnists? It's all canned. Oh yeah, you can go for 12,000 miles in all directions, and you will find, say, Jim Bishop in every paper. You go 12,000 miles in the other direction, and you'll find, say, James Reston in all the other papers. Yeah, oh, I mean, this is supplanted network television and radio commentary. It's become a kind of canned, what I suppose you could call it. The word is, possibly, syndicated journalism. Really, it's the many newspapers in the country don't even have reporters. They don't need reporters anymore. No, they don't. They really don't. They have a publisher. They have a guy that sets the type. They have a bunch of people that run around and sell ads. And way down at the bottom of the list, there are 2 or 3 guys that keep writing the obits. And all the rest of the stuff comes in from various, quote, sources. Comes in from the wire, it's called. And so it's all tied in together. But whenever it begins to bother me like that, I read, say, the Nome Nugget. It's a great newspaper to read. The Nome Nugget. And by the way, they get peanuts up there, too. So you can't get away from peanuts. Mary Worth and the Wizard of Id pursues you. It's going to pursue you all. Can't you just see yourself arriving in hell? And the paper arrives on the front step of the fiery furnace where you're sitting there stoking the fire, and the first thing that pops out at you is Snoopy. Oh God, I can't get away no matter what happens. And I read this paper, the Nugget, and one of my favorite papers, by the way, is a paper from Maine. Yeah, Maine. I read the Advertiser Democrat. You never heard of the Advertiser? Now, there's the paper that comes right out and says it. The Advertiser Democrat. Apparently, with a name like that, that means we'll take any ad. Democracy, right? Advertiser. The Advertiser Democrat, meaning we'll take any ad. I mean, we make no differentiation. But it's a great paper, and it's only about what's happening there. And it's real news. Now, what is real news? Now, real news is as opposed to events. Now, events generally have very little to do with any of us. And so you will read in the paper, the president makes an address on the economy. Well, that's interesting. Or you'll read in the paper, George Meany charges chicanery in high places. And by God, his union is going to fight it right down to the end, and they want more money. Okay. So that doesn't really affect you. You're working at the Acme Bolton Rivet Company, in the tabulating department, and life is just one lunch after the other. That's about all. The only difference is one day you have peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in your paper bag, and the next day you have tuna fish salad sandwiches in your paper bag. And, that's what, well, I'm just describing what life is for most people. And they measure their days not by, I don't think the world will end with a bang and a whimper, and I don't think most people today measure their days by coffee spoons. Quick, who am I quoting? T.S. Eliot. How do you like that? So, yeah, that's not exactly a lightweight. But I don't think that they do measure their days by coffee spoons today. I think they measure their days by whether or not Cannon is on or whether Hawaii 5-0 is on tonight. That's what the days have become to most people. And, there's rising excitement by about 4 o'clock in the afternoon among many people. Oh, Cannon's on tonight. That makes this day worth living. Hawaii 5-0 is on tonight. Another big day, a red-letter day in existence. You see the point of that, Joe? So the real news, really, involves what happens to actual people. And so you're walking around here in your office, and a real news item is, did you hear what happened to J.G. Snyder of Costa County? And somebody said, what happened to him? Says, well, he had such an unbelievable case of athlete's foot that he had to go to the hospital. And now he's back again, and he got rid of his athlete's foot. He had to go to the hospital. Now, that's news. The word gets out. Everybody talks about J.G.'s fantastic case of athlete's foot. Or, hey, did you hear what Clarence did down in the mail room? And they said, what did he do? Well, you hear what he got thrown out of the Bluebird Tavern the other night, drunker than a coot. And the word goes out. Now, that's real news. You agree? Okay, do you want to hear what's happening in South Paris, Maine? This is a contemporary news. Yes, South Paris, Norway, and South Paris, Maine. This is the Advertiser Democrat, one of my favorite papers. And I have selected a group of news notes that you might like to hear because it's true news. Okay? All right, here's a news note from South Waterford, Maine. Alan White shot a big woodchuck in his garden. It had consumed a lot of his cucumbers before he finally spotted him. Now a spell of cool weather is holding the gardens back. Woodchucks are plentiful and hungry, as well as more bugs every year. Okay, that's what's happening in South Waterford. Now, you want to know what happened in North Paris the other day? Owen Bonney Sr. went grocery shopping with his wife Thursday morning. He got new blades for his electric razor. He can shave now again. Arthur Allen fell Sunday and cut the side of his face on a table. Boy, there's a lot of action in North Paris. I like now that's real news. Really. Orville Sather yesterday got his shoes resold. Well, now everyone would everyone would appreciate that, wouldn't they? Right? Okay, here's what happened in Newry, Maine. David Fleet has his haying all done, and he finished it, and now he's just settling back. I mean, this guy's got it made. Linda Harrington had a new mare arrive Monday afternoon from Florida. She had traveled since 6 p.m. Saturday and was one tired lady. We're talking about the mare, not Linda. Okay? And Roland Morin had the misfortune to hit a medium-sized bear at the dump, killing it instantly and damaging his car a lot. Allstate is now considering whether they're going to pay or not. Okay? I mean, there's a rumor around that he was chasing the bear, and of course you don't get that, and the bear turned and bopped in his grill. So, this is pretty nasty. You want to hear more news? Okay, here's what happened in Freiburg at the toll bridge. This is a special byline report by George Fraser. Sunday night, while driving on Route 5, Mr. Hammond of Lovell saw a large bull moose cross the road ahead of him, and he had slowed down. He then ran into a smaller bull by Barker's driveway, which was following the larger one. He got mousetrapped, see? Bashed in the front of his car, its small set of antlers were in the velvet. Fred Gould and the game warden were called to the scene. There was some damage to the car, although the bull is limping heavily at this point. We see what happened there. Now that's news. That's a real news note. They have a lot of woodchuck problems up in Maine. You want to hear another woodchuck news flash? Mylan Cummings of West Paris spent a night and day at his grandparents' to see if he could get a woodchuck that was raiding their garden. He found holes he felt they were living in, and by giving them a smoking out treatment, nothing happened. Obviously, they either moved or else they just are getting used to smoke. Anyway, he didn't get any of the woodchucks, and he's going back next weekend to try again. Now, that's a news note from North Waterford. Here's a great news item from Lovell, Maine again. And this is a news flash that was written in or penned in by the Lovell correspondent of the Advertiser-Democrat. Hot flash had opened up her column for the week. Mrs. Paul Morton dropped in on Mrs. Frances Heath for a minute. Well, you know, if you know the two, you know that's quite a news item. You know, they haven't been getting along for years. Ever since that night at the PTA. You remember, the one that when Mrs. Norton made the remark about Mrs. Heath potato salad, they haven't talked, and now they're getting back together again, and things are smoothing out in Lovell. So you have to know the background of these people. For example, here's another note from Freiburg. Dr. Jarvis has painted the front of his house. It covers the place where the old porch was torn off. You know, that's been a lot of talk around town with all the money that Dr. Jarvis is making with those appendix operations and stuff, and he didn't even paint the front of his house where the porch came off, you know. Now, would you like to hear what's happening in Bryant Pond? After 9 months in Boston, certainly good to be back on Lower Main Street. You know, this correspondent spent a lot of time in the big city. It says, there's one thing we miss very much, and that's the loss of our whistle at the spool factory. It seems that when we were off visiting in Boston, somebody did away with the whistle at the spool factory, and we miss it. It says, we also heard, though, however, with joy, the chime, the deep chime of the bell at the clothespin factory. You didn't know there was a spool factory and a clothespin factory in Bryant Pond. Well, where do you think you get your clothespins from? Do you think that the clothespin ferry makes them for you? What kind of a fool are you? Andover, Maine, we have a bear and a moose on loose in the town. They have been seen in different parts of the town. Now, that is news item. Now, if you think that's a joke, let me tell you something now. I was just a few months ago, I was up in Waterville, Maine. Now, that's a big city compared to most cities in Maine. Waterville's a good-sized town. In fact, it's the hometown of Senator who? Senator Muskie, for heaven's sakes. And it's a big town, see? Well, you know, they got all kinds of superhighways and stuff coming into town there. And on a quiet Wednesday night, the only action in town there really after 7 o'clock is the, there's a local Zares. Everybody goes in and stands around and watches people buy popcorn and stuff in the lobby. You know what the Zares is there. You don't know what Zares is? Well, that's a big discount store. Let's put it this way. Up in Boston and Maine, up that whole area up there, the Zare, that's Z-I-Z-A-Y-R-E, Zare. That's a big discount chain. It's something like, let's say, a New England version of Great Eastern or Two Guys from Harrison, you know. And you go in there, they got the great big shop there, and they have canoes and all that stuff, always on special. And there's thousands and thousands of racks full of stuff, and the people go down there. It's all lit up, see, and they're open every night till 9, you know. So that's the big action in Waterville, is to go walk around Zares. After, say, 7 o'clock at night, you walk around Zares. And then after Zares closes, of course, the place is in total silence. They close at 9. And where does everybody go then after 9 o'clock? Well, there's two places. There's a place where they sell a thing called the Syrian Dagwood sandwich. Everybody goes there. Yeah, it's Tony's place, and they have a Syrian Dagwood. Fantastic sandwich. They say that the Syrian Dagwood is such a powerful sandwich that it can cure cases, as they say up there, arthritis. Also, it also can cure certain cases of bronchial trouble. You know, all through New England, they have things called bronchial trouble. Have you ever known anybody that had bronchial trouble and arthritis at the same time? Also, there's another curse that folk medicine people have, and that's called back trouble. You've known people that had back trouble. And then there's a thing that attacks women among the folk world, and that's called nerves. She suffered from nerves for years. You've heard of ladies who suffer from nerves? Of course, her husband has both arthritis and back trouble. And that's not easy. And you go to a chiropractor for all those things, right? Okay? You do. So, nevertheless, at 9 o'clock when the lights go out in Zares, and everybody has to go running out in the parking lot and get in their car, where do you go? Well, you don't just, first of all, you drive up and down Main Street about 7 times just to see what's happening. And, of course, you discover once again that nothing is happening. So you go to the only place in town where the real action, that's McDonald's. That's McDonald's on Upper Main Street. Now, that's really exciting because they have driveways on both sides, and you see, you can tell when Zehrs lets out because the parking lot immediately fills up with large amounts of Maine types who come in for their Big Mac, to polish off the night, their Big Mac. And, usually either that, sometimes they get a cherry milkshake and a Big Mac, followed by a quarter pounder with cheese. And often, for just to polish it off, then they'll polish it off with a classical quarter pounder as opposed to the cheese. And they sit there all night long and talk and holler till that closes. Now, everybody was down there on this Wednesday night. It is about 9:30. I happen to be in the immediate vicinity. It's 9:30 at night. Now, you don't see this kind of stuff in the New York Times. This is real news. It is 9:30 on a Wednesday night, and the usual haute monde had gathered at the McDonald's. And they're all there sitting in their cars, their 53 Chevys. And there you see all kinds of Saabs up there for some reason or other due to the extreme climate up there. The Saab is great up there, all covered with mud. And those Maine license plates almost unreadable because of the mud and stuff. And they're all sitting there in the parking lot. Now, this is a big town again, I must add. It's not a little bitty town. And they're chomping away at the Big Macs when all of a sudden, coming along Upper Main Street, walking along just like anybody else, walking on the sidewalk, would you believe it? They have a sidewalk in that area there. He's walking on a sidewalk, and he walks right into the parking lot, and incidentally, cleared out the parking lot in a split second. The parking lot was cleared. People took off like birds. I mean, you should have seen it. It was like starlings. They flew down the street yelling and hollering and hitting each other. All right. You know what it was? It was fantastic. Can you imagine if this happened right here on 6th Avenue or Broadway, what would happen? Walking right down on his hind legs was a 7-foot-tall bear. 7 feet, friends. And he just walked right down, standing up on his hind legs. He walked right into the parking lot at McDonald's. Ah! The people, took off. And he just walked in there, and he took one look, at the joint. And, of course, all the people inside McDonald's, there was a lot of excitement in there, Ronald was making a state visit there that night. And there was a lot of confusion, and a lot. It was. They tell me that he caused over $75 worth of damage. He didn't do anything, but of course, what happened? All these big machines that are making the hamburgers, everybody ran away, and the next thing you know, 1,600 pounds of French fries were overdone. Everything just went to hell there for a while. And this bear just walked around the parking lot about 4 times and then went right back out on Upper Main Street and continued in his general direction towards the dump. He was not seen again that night. However, it was a leading news item. Now, you should hear about that kind of stuff. You want to hear another one? One night I'm sitting, I happen to be in the motel up in that area there, and I turn on the radio, and the announcer comes on just as calm as anybody. He says, he said, before we go on to state and national news, the state police have issued a warning of a gang of marauding bears which have been moving through town and are moving in a southeasterly direction. All residents are advised to stay in their house and to wrap all garbage well, because the bears are on their way. And now to the weather. I thought to myself, you just don't hear that kind of news item. Do you want to hear some more now? Listen to this. Oh, this is something. Here. Well, here we go. Bill Eastman in Stowe, this is S-T-O-W, Maine, had the misfortune to break his glasses the other day. Well, that's a news item, especially if you know Bill. I mean, he can't see a foot in front of his face, and he broke his glasses, and of course he had to go send all the way to Boston to get new lenses. And how he broke them when he was cleaning them. One of the lenses fell out, and he stepped on it. Well, this is the kind of news item I like to hear. Here's one. In Freiburg, William Robbins has purchased a planer for his own use. He has picked up quite a lot of custom work, however. It makes a big pile of shavings when he uses his planer, and he's now putting these between the rows in his raspberry patch to keep the weeds down. I mean, you can't put down old Bill Robbins. He's right with it. Here's one in Stowe again. Nat Halkett went to Turner Wednesday to get her hair done. And her mother went along for the ride. Well, if you know anything about her hair, you know it was about time. My God, that was getting to be a sight. Here's one here, too. Oh, yeah. Here's one from Stowe again. The correspondent says, my husband has the prettiest toe in town. A cow stepped on his toe Saturday, and now it's red, purple, black, and yellow. The nail is about to fall off. Well, this is news. Owen Bonney Sr. is used up with arthritis in his good leg. Used up. Now, there's a phrase you never heard here in town, did you? Used up means he's in trouble. Mrs. Ruth Wilton and her granddaughter visited Wilson Sunday. Ruth brought back some sickly plants. She brought back some sickly plants for Irene to bring back to health. By the way, in Hunt's Corner, the week's callers of Mrs. and Mr. Dick Bennett and boys were Mr. and Mrs. Harold Nutting of Bethel. They dropped in, had a cup of coffee, and went on. They spent 5 minutes very pleasantly in conversation. Myrtle Summer of Greenwood reported a catastrophe when one of her dogs came in contact with a large male skunk. The town is recovering, however. Scott Wilfong was attacked and severely bitten on the wrist by a chicken last week. You know. Lovell, Henry Heath cleaned his father-in-law's chimbley. And by the way, Frances gave her sister a permanent and curled her mother's hair while visiting the Heaths. Virginia Brewer was pickling beets last week again. Well, now, if you know anything about Virginia, you know that's an important news item. She's had a beet hang-up for years. She's pickled over 4,000 quarts a year for years on end, and now the whole basement is filled with pickled beets. They don't know where the hell to put them. Sunday River, news note, the women bird watchers were in town the other day and stopped to talk. They talked, who were they talking with? Well, they were talking with our gander. It's you know what a gander is, don't you? It says he answered right back. That's kind of good. Fred Judkins, incidentally, is looking for an outdoor water tub. Last week he patched up the old wooden one, and now it leaks worse than it did before. So Fred's still in trouble. God, he had more trouble. Mrs. Mary Moran's dog of Sunday River has a nice new doghouse in preparation for the winter. Now that's news. That's news. Well, you know he was sleeping under the porch down at the town hall for years. And now he's got that new house.